what's shaking, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Monday Overreaction Show here on the Orange Bloods Texas Football YouTube channel. I'm Geoff. That's Anwar. Oh, we're going to have fun today. This show brought to you by the amazing people at Rogue Apothecary, aka therogueshop.com. Go there, check out all of your CBD needs. We like the gummies. We like the cartridges. We like just about everything that they make. Go check them out. They're wonderful sponsors of the show. They do amazing things for Texas fans in the Texas community. Just recently helping out one of our own on Orange Bloods by just trying to help with medical bills and things like that. They're good people with a great product. And we love the fact that we're connected with them because it makes for a fantastic partnership.
Speaking of a great product, Ketch, I was thinking, as we're getting close to Valentine's Day, now would be a time to give the gift of Orange Bloods to someone that you love, because I think we have a great product as well. I just want to do a little promo for us.
A Valentine's Day promo.
Yes, whether it's it doesn't have to just be for a man. Could be.
I'm with you.
We have tons of women who are on.
Love yourself.
Yes.
Love yourself.
All
right, do us a solid. Like the video. Subscribe to our website. Subscribe to the channel. Both. Give the gift that keeps on giving. And look, it's also a reminder, on Wednesday, Anwar and I will be holding down the fort again for National Signing Day 2. Our coverage will start at 8 a.m. Central. If you're watching this video, we're just a couple of days away, less than 48 hours. We will have guests. We will have recruiting talk. We will lead everybody up to the Devin Campbell decision. We'll be talking portal. It will be a frolicking good time, and we hope you join us. And oh, by the way, Rogue Apothecary sponsoring that as well. Anwar, it's a Monday overreaction show. I've got an overreaction. Okay. I think you and I might share the overreaction, because I saw your tweet yesterday on Sunday, and I was like, you just wrote a section. Our brains were literally in the same place. Impossible not to, I think, lead off with the fact that the NFL has its Super Bowl, Rams Bengals, which, yeah, man, Mack Brown and the Bengals getting back to the Super Bowl before the Cowboys is a bitter, bitter pill to swallow. But it speaks to the greatness of what a truly special quarterback talent can do for an NFL franchise. And as I'm watching Joe Burrow go into Arrowhead yesterday and come back from 18 down to lead the Bengals of all teams back to the Super Bowl, like a year removed from tearing ligaments in his knee, it was impossible for me not to think about LSU Texas 2.5 years ago, or whenever it was, September of 2019. I feel like we watched the birth of potentially an all-time great player. And for so long, the third and seven, my overreaction today is that Joe Burrow, when he's done, is changing the way we're going to remember that LSU game. And 20 years from now, I don't think it's going to be 3rd and 17 and look at Texas collapsed. I think we'll look back and say, wow, an all-time great quarterback came to DKR and played like an all-time great quarterback. And it was literally the birth of the Joe Burrow that we see tonight, that we see today going to the Super Bowl. It all really started that night at DKR.
It did. And I mean, it's almost, Catch, when you look back at it, it's a cup. I now look and say, wait a second. That team had Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, right? They had Justin Jefferson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And you're like, and now in hindsight, I'm like, oh, maybe we're a little bit too hard on Todd Orlando. It's like, I almost feel, if you're Todd Orlando, you go, well, the reason why I blitz because he's that freaking good. And I was trying to get some pressure on the guy, because now we look at that and we go, man, that was an all-pro freaking team. Like, that's just the offensive side of the ball. We haven't gotten to the defensive side. I look back on it and I go, man, Texas had a chance to win that game. Like, I mean, if we don't know what happens if that touchdown pass is caught in the end zone, but we know at least it's a tie. and then 3rd and 17. But to your point, Joe Burrow entered that season and that game catch as kind of just a guy. He had a year before that at LSU, and they were okay. They were good, but we didn't look at it and go, that guy's a world beater. And then Joe Brady shows up at LSU, and somehow, again, it's like it's a Joe Brady hire. He comes from the Saints, and it's like, okay. And Joe Brady somehow figures out the code. He figured out the matrix. He figured
well, you know what the code was? I can figure out the code.
Which was?
Stop running that prehistoric offense.
Yeah.
Let Joe Burrow get in the shotgun and let him throw the ball all over the field to like a bunch of badass dudes.
It was a good code because they didn't have it beforehand. Remember, he was a passing game coordinator. He wasn't the OC. He was a passing game coordinator. He goes in and catch. It makes me now look back at the 2019 game with a little bit more empathy that I had before, and not necessarily like it was blown. And look at what Texas, I look at it and go, damn, you actually, and there's no consolation prize. You don't get a trophy for being able to say you hung with a team. But historically, Catch, to your point, I think we'll look back at it a little bit differently, and we won't scoff at it the way
it's the
maybe
highest
we did originally.
level of. Here's an overreaction on a Monday. It's the highest level of football that Texas has played in any game in your tenure at Orange Blood. So almost a decade. I mean, Texas fans, and look, I'm like this as well. You look back at Vince Young, and the more time goes by, the more special you realize how good he was, how good that team was. And there's nothing that you can make you think that team could be beaten based on the way that season went. LSU fans feel the same way about that LSU team. When LSU finished that season, immediately afterwards, the thought was that might be the best college offense in the history of college football. Yeah. That's before these dudes got to the NFL. Yeah. That's before Joe Burrow. Oh, there's nothing fluky about him. He's amazing. That's before Jamar Chase turned into, or I can't tell which one's Jerry Rice Jr. Is it Chase or is it Jefferson? Because Jefferson's NFL career is, I think, the start of his career is better than any receiver in the history of the sport. You mentioned Edwards-Helaire. Like, that was just an offense that was loaded, and Texas stood toe-to-toe. That's the greatest night of time, even more than beating Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. The football display at DKR that night between a Joe Burrow who was hot and an LSU offense that Texas couldn't even get that offense to punt, but they hung in there, play for play, for almost 4 quarters. And
Catch, by the way, the LSU, as I looked it up because I want to make sure I was correct, they had 14 players off that team drafted, Catch.
The next year.
14!
It's not even underclassmen.
Number 1 overall pick down to a tight end that was drafted by the Dolphins. I mean, like, I know you'd like to do your metrics on like guys getting drafted in 14. Like, what planet are we even on?
Well, what we'll do is we would look back at that LSU team. And, I always say the thing about recruiting, and we'll talk about this Wednesday when we do our live show, it's all about being ahead of the math. So if you can develop 4 stars higher than the rate of the national average, that's how you win championships. Same if you can get, Charlie Strong got the Texas job because while he was at Louisville, he developed 3-star guys at the rates of 4 stars. And cheating the margins or bettering the margins is what leads a team to a championship. That's what LSU was able to do with that kind of team. We talk about that many guys getting drafted. It means when you go back and look at their recruiting classes that led up to it, especially if you include Burrow as a transfer in the recruiting class, the same way that we look at Quinn Ewers, the recruiting class. The metrics say that Joe Burrow is a 1 and 10 kind of guy. That's just to make the NFL. Forget about anything else. That you take a margin like that and he turns into the number 1 overall pick in the draft. Like that's when you're creating something that could end up being special. And I think when we look at Steve Sarkisian and this Texas team, and we talk about this recruiting class in the next couple of days, we have to stop having conversations where you say, how many 5 stars does it take to beat Oklahoma State or TCU or whomever? And we have to start at some point having the kind of progress that's made that has us asking, gosh, how well is Texas really developing players? As long as you're still asking that question, Texas isn't developing the talent that it has at the rates that it needs to. And it's kind of as simple as that, because the moment Anwar starts asking different questions about the Texas football program, I think is the moment when we know this thing's really headed in the right direction. And every year you ask that same question, and really it's about 3 or 4 teams that it seemingly applies to every year.
Every year.
That's when we know, that's what has to change. And it takes more than, that's why, as important as Quinn Ewers is, it takes more than, it wasn't Joe Burrow got drafted by LSU. Look how great they were as a team. Joe Burrow hit an all-time great level, and he was surrounded by immense talent. And that's what Texas is trying to do. They're trying to get a quarterback to hit at an incredibly high level and do it at the exact moment that they're able to surround him with a ton of NFL talent. And getting to the playoffs almost doesn't matter if you don't have that. All that means is you'll get your ass kicked in the playoffs by somebody that does have that. So that's where we are. Joe Burrow this weekend, and thinking back on that 2019 LSU team, that's the pathway that Texas eventually has to find itself in. For a long time, people looked at LSU and thought they're not going to be able to get there. They're certainly not going to be able to get there with the coaching that they have, right? I mean, they don't even have the same coach anymore. It's all about special talent and cultivating a big nucleus of talent. And that's where Sarkisian and the staff really are now. This offseason, and cultivating the talent and taking steps towards replacing the framing of this program, that's the next thing that has to happen.
No, I think you're 100% correct. Because I was trying to write down stuff as you were talking, and I started thinking, okay, who do we think right now, Ketch, is NFL ready, or at least not NFL ready, NFL talent on this team? Now, I won't say ready. Bijan would probably be ready, right? You would say he's the guy. Xavier Worthy, we expect him to do 2 more years. I mean, with his current trajectory, he should be gone. We think of Quinn as, a guy in the future.
He better be.
Yeah, correct. I mean, because that's what you need. I mean, you can't settle for anything less. If you don't have that guy quarterback, you just don't win. And I'm starting to think, okay, and there's a lot of other questions once we get past. I mean, DeMarvion Overshown is a guy that we believe, will be there. I think he's got to have a little bit of a better season. But, it's not right now as it stands, Ketch. There's not a ton. I'm sure I'm missing someone, in there. But I'm thinking about draftable guys. I'm going to talk about guys who might be 7th to, late, undrafted. I mean, when I start thinking, I'm thinking no less than the middle of the draft, because I can't project the 7th rounder. I can't project the 6th rounder. I mean, that's just too much guesswork at this point. So there's not a ton. So getting to that point of what you're saying, developing the talent that's on the team and getting the most out of it. The one thing that you say about Tom Herman, they were able to take certain guys, and I'll give you a good example, like a Malik Jefferson, who going into it was kind of like a guy that, one of the things you always pointed out, Malik Jefferson really got shitted on a lot when he was here. And he got shitted on by, Charlie Strong, and then some of the staff when they compared him to a cubic zirconia. You remember that?
Oh,
he's
yeah.
not a diamond, he's a cubic zirconia. And you're like, wow, that kind of sucked. And then he had to deal with some things initially when Tom got here. But then eventually they turned him into a third round pick. For a guy who by people would have said was disappointing. So I think the two things, Ketch, are one, developing the guys that you have, that's the easy thing, but then taking some of the other guys that you've inherited, like they did with Malik Jefferson, like they did with Charles Omenihu, like they did with Chris Boyd, and remember a lot of those guys, they would come off a 5-7 team. They weren't viewed as that good. That to me is the other step in the evolution, Ketch. Developing the guys that you have. You can't say those are somebody else's guys. Develop what you got, and then take the guys that you're recruiting and then build on that and develop them as well.
It is, I think, and people watching this video, they're not going to like me saying this out loud, but like, this is the reason why you watch the Monday Overreaction show. We keep it a buck on this channel. We don't just say yes men type of things. I think one of the concerning things I have about Sarkisian and this staff going into this offseason of development is it seems like when Charlie arrived, he took a bunch of underachieving talent from Mack and was able to make some stuff out of that defense in 2014. When Charlie first got here, like he took some defensive parts and made it work, and they were pretty good. And Tom Herman kind of did the same thing with some of the talent that Charlie left behind in year one. Like he got a lot out of Deshaun Elliott and got a lot out of some guys who were thought to be Charlie guys. Malik is, I think, a perfect example of that, right? He got Malik Jefferson's best season out of him. And, I think Malik was just ready to get the hell up on out of Austin when he left, by the time he left. But I don't know that this past season we saw this staff take what Tom Herman left behind and made chicken soup out of whatever it is that chicken parts they might have thought that was left behind for them. It's all about like Texas is going to recruit. They're going to recruit really well. And if Sarkisian's able to stack class after class, like the one that he's signing both in December and then finishing off on Wednesday, there's a basement, I think, for how poor Texas will be. You have enough talent, you'll be pretty good always. Yeah. Cheating the margins and bettering the national averages so that you are, I don't want to say overperforming, you're just performing at a really high level. That's what the expectations is of Sarkisian and the staff. A year ago, we didn't see that. So I have no doubts about their ability to recruit. I do have some doubts a little bit about, okay, what does the development between January and August look like for what's on the team? I have no set of high expectations because we don't yet have a body of work to lean on and say, oh, well, you saw what they did in year one. They really got guys to perform at levels that we haven't seen before. That didn't happen last year. And it's exactly the thing that has to happen this year. Like this thing will be a disaster and a failure if in October we don't have a list of players that we're doing shows on that are overperforming their expectations. The problem with Texas is you set super high expectations and they never meet them. What has to happen with this program this year is that you've got to go above for once, one time, if only one time, go above the expectations, get a group of guys to go beyond what we think they're capable of. It's the challenge that the staff has. And it's easier said than done than to just get a whole bunch of guys at the exact same time to play their best football together. Instead of Xavier Worthy was great last year. What about the rest of the offense outside of Xavier and Bijan Robinson? And it's crickets. There's no linemen. The quarterback position's up and down. It is a tall task. And I'm fascinated to see if Sarkisian and the staff can take a step towards accomplishing that. Because if they can't do it this season, I think there would be some things revealed to us that are harsh, but would probably turn out to be true with regards to the long-term future of the program. Like at some point, they got to be those dudes, and they weren't those dudes a year ago.
It's interesting. I think one of the things that I remember Herman getting criticized for pretty heavily when he started talking about, I think he made, I think it was, if I remember the timeline correctly, I think he made a fairy dust comment about you can't sprinkle fairy dust and make things happen. And then that's when Urban kind of responded back in the days when people were listening to Urban Meyer. And before his thumb went into places that we didn't think it should go in public. But he talked about, hey, you inherited those guys. These are your guys.
Yeah.
If you inherit them, they're yours. That's your team, and you've got to take ownership of it. And I think we applauded Urban at that time. We're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think the same thing applies too. We can't go and simply say, well, those are Herman's guys, but we need Sark to get his guys. You know,
and it didn't sound like Sark wanted to do that a year ago. That's not what wasn't his offseason message. It's only when this team couldn't close the deal, really starting in October, game in and game out, that this idea even started to fester. Like this coaching staff expected more from itself a year ago than the results that they produced.
Yeah. And then it became, we got to get get the guys in. Then the transition catch into, there's going to be 30 something openings, and that's going to be, a really good opportunity. Like then it transition into that. But let me throw something at you though, Ketch. And I'm going to throw this at you. And when we start talking about like the development standpoint, and this would be something for everyone's listening. If you want to put this down in the comments, I would love to see what you guys say too. Ketch, who are some guys you look at on offense and defense that you say, I need to see these players developed more in order for me to really be whether impressed or feel like this team has made some progress? And we're talking a little bit, we kind of transition into, and we maybe even develop into an NFL player, right? Developing into an NFL player means there's something good going on at that position. If from an offensive standpoint, I don't know if you want to start there, or maybe defense, because that would we probably don't think of a lot of guys on a defense that.
Oh man, I got them.
Okay, go for it.
So on the offensive side of the ball, let's just ignore the Ewers conversation. We know, right? Duh.
Yeah.
Young quarterback needs to develop as much as he can possibly develop in an offseason. I think we go to the offensive line. There are two guys that jump out to me. And part of Kyle Flood's mission is to get these young kids that'll be true freshmen ready to play. Clearly, they're going to lean on those guys. But Junior Angelau now is a veteran in that group. This is, he's the best returning lineman that they have. But I don't know that I would describe him as more than a third day guy in the NFL. He's going to end up starting a lot of football. He's going to get drafted, but can he turn himself into a day two guy? Because that's what this team and this program need. Consequently, you probably would like to see Jake Majors take the jump that Angelau did a year ago, where, well, he looks like I don't know that Jake Majors, as much as I love Jake, and he's an Orange Bloods athlete, I think Jake would probably admit like his best football hasn't been played. So those two guys have to play a better brand of football. And I think those guys are going through the offseason demanding more of themselves. So I don't think I'm saying anything controversial. I think at the wide receiver position, can Brennan Marion get one of those 500 dudes on campus, not named Naylor or Worthy or even Whittington? Like there's a group that they feel, I think, comfortable with. Not one dude developed a year ago from, Sarkisian shows up and is like, what the hell's up with all these wide receivers on campus?
It's like, why we got 19 guys?
Yeah. Why are there 500 receivers on campus?
Yeah.
I don't think he ever would have thought in a million years, well, I won't be able to get any of those dudes to really take a step forward. which is one of the reasons why Naylor is so critical to this offseason, is that they had that many receivers a year ago and nobody was developing. I think there aren't enough other guys to talk about on the offensive side. So it's that position group as a whole. Tight ends, they're young, but really those two offensive linemen that I mentioned, Majors and Angelau, I think are critical because it's hard. Texas isn't going to win many games this year above 7 if Angelau and Majors don't take steps forward. They won't be good enough up front. On the defensive side of the ball, Alfred Collins is an obvious one to me. I think what kind of step can Byron Murphy take in year 2? He was, according to our guy, Alex Dunlap, from a statistical impact play per snap standpoint, Murphy was the best guy on the team by almost a pretty large, considerable margin. But the overall volume of production didn't scream that he was that kind of guy. Overshown, you mentioned, pick any dude in the secondary because all of them had disappointing seasons. Deshaun Jameson was a disappointment. I think that Anthony Cook would be in the NFL today going to the NFL today if he truly felt like, I think he was ready for that and had the kind of season that would make him more than a late round pick. So, I mean, all those dudes on defense, other than Murphy and Collins, are playing for NFL awareness immediately. This is a contract year for Overshown. This is contract year number 2 for Deshaun Jameson and Anthony Cook. And then, I don't even know what to say about the pass rush guys, other than there's where there's a will, there's got to be a way. And last year there was no way. They were so poor at getting to the quarterback that they almost have to double their output in terms of pass rush in 2022 just to get to the good level. Not great, just to make it good. They almost have to double the production from a year ago.
They don't. I mean, they need O'Shawn Mathis, right? I mean, that becomes the savior at that point. When you talk about the pass rush, if you can get him on board and get that guy, now all of a sudden you got the opportunity, as opposed to trying to generate it, do different schemes and everything to that effect, because it was hard. It's so hard with the secondary guys when you don't get a rush and guys are just taking their time and just having all day to throw. You saw that so much. And Ketch, it's funny. You pretty much named everyone on defense. I was taking notes and I was like, wait, okay, so all right, pretty much everyone on the defense. I think I
named like 5 guys.
Huh?
Murphy.
You said
Collins, yes. Overshown, Jameson, yes. And then I said Cook, but I didn't really, he's just a guy that's got to take another step. He is, I think, one of about 5 or 6 players that they actually did a really good job of getting more out of last year than the previous staff did. But just, it's interesting. They went to Cook less in the last month of the season. He got less playing time because they played less nickel. And I wonder if in a weird way that solidified them getting him back for another year, because he was really flying 7-8 games into the season. It was like, wow, Anthony Cook is the best player on the defense. Yeah. But by the end of the year, he was barely playing. And I think that somewhat pushed Anthony Cook into needing to return for another year, because he has to be more than a nickel guy, right? I mean, if he's going to be better than a late round flyer, he's got to be more than a nickel guy that Texas doesn't keep on the field at all times. So that's the step that he has. Anthony Cook went from really not that good at all to best player in a bad secondary. It would mean a lot if he ends up being the best player in a good secondary. That will mean that he took a step forward, but so did all the guys around him. I think you're right. It does sound like I'm naming everybody on the defense, but I think I've only specifically called out 4 guys. I don't know what to ask of the other linebackers on this team.
Yeah, what do you want from Ovi? You know, I mean, he's one of our guys, but like, what do you want from him? What do you want from
Half dozen
Ford,
sacks.
Ruckemeyer?
If Ovi can get to a half dozen sacks, he's going to play on Sundays. I mean, all you got to do is be able to rush the passer a little bit. And the NFL will give you more than a chance. And I think that, in a way, Ovi did take a step forward from where he had been at Notre Dame, in that he was maybe not. He was a rotational player on a really good defense. And then he became a slightly more used rotational player on a bad defense. Now, that ain't all his fault. I think he took a baby step forward of progress